The sun spills over the glass of the small Manhattan studio, turning rolls of tracing paper and metal rulers into bright lines of white. The place smells like coffee, printer ink, and fresh plywood. Outside the window, traffic hums and a jackhammer rattles somewhere down the block. Inside, Winnie Grant barely notices any of it. She stands over her drafting table in worn sneakers and black jeans, dark hair twisted into a messy knot at the back of her head, eyes narrowed at the tower sketched in front of her. The new cultural center slices up from the paper, all sharp angles and open terraces. She adjusts the curve of a stair, adds a note about natural light, then leans back and squints. It still feels too polite, she murmurs. She grabs a softer pencil and drags a bold line through the atrium, opening it wider, riskier, more her. Something in her chest loosens. Better. The bell above the studio door jingles. Without looking up, she calls. We are not taking new clients without an appointment today. The boss is in a committed relationship with this deadline. The door does not close. Heels click across the polished concrete floor. Not the hesitant tap of a lost walk-in client. A slow, deliberate staccato. Each step says I own the room. Winnie's hand stills on the paper. She lifts her head. A woman stands in the middle of her studio like she is standing in a hotel lobby that disappointed her. Perfectly set blonde hair, not a strand out of place. Diamond earrings that whisper old money every time she moves. A cream coat that probably costs more than the rent for this floor. Two men in dark suits block the doorway behind her, shoulders wide, eyes blank. Security, not bodyguards. The kind that are used to making problems disappear. The woman looks around once, gaze skimming past the hanging models, the pinned-up drafts, the single flickering floor lamp in the corner. Judgment tightens her mouth. Miss Grant, I presume, she says. Winnie knows that voice. She has heard it through a phone speaker, cool and polite, saying things like Ethan is busy tonight, or the family dinner will be next Sunday. She has never heard it in person. Winnie wipes her hands on her jeans and straightens. Mrs. Walker. Catherine Walker does not bother to correct the name. Everyone in New York knows her as Mrs. Walker, widow of the man who turned Walker Group into a giant, mother of the current invisible heir, mother of the man Winnie has been secretly dating for almost a year. Catherine takes one step closer, the scent of expensive perfume sliding into the space between them. This is smaller than I imagined, she says. Winnie smiles without warmth. That is what everyone says until they see the portfolio. Catherine's painted mouth curls. I am not here for your portfolio. She unclasps her designer handbag, reaches inside, and pulls out a pale blue checkbook. The sound of the pen scraping across paper is absurdly loud in the quiet studio. The two men at the door do not move. The city noise fades into a dull hiss. Something cold curls in Winnie's stomach. Mrs. Walker, she says, voice very steady. What are you doing? Catherine tears the check from the book with a practiced flick and lays it on the drafting table, right on top of the tower that has kept Winnie up for 3 nights in a row. The paper makes a soft slap against the drawing. $10 million, Catherine says. You will find it is more than generous. Ink glints in the light. Winnie can see the zeros even without reading them. Her name is written in a flawless hand. $10 million and no memo line. For what exactly? Winnie asks, though every cell in her body already knows. To walk away from my son, Catherine says. And from this fantasy. She flicks one manicured finger at the studio around them. Winnie's spine goes rigid. She picks up the check between 2 fingers, as if it might sting. Her heart is beating hard enough to shake her rib cage, but her voice comes out light. You came all the way downtown in those shoes for this, she says. I would almost be flattered if it was not so insulting. Insulting? Catherine laughs once, sharp and disbelieving. What is insulting, Miss Grant, is that you believed you could keep playing house with Ethan without consequences. She steps closer again, eyes glittering now. You knew who he was, she says. You knew what family he belongs to, and yet you encouraged this little office romance, let it go on, until he was serious enough to tell me his intentions. The words hit like stones. He told her. She is different, mother, Catherine says, mimicking Ethan's lower voice with lazy precision. She does not care about the money. She understands me. She tilts her head. Tell me, Miss Grant, is that what you told him? That you do not care about the Walker fortune? Heat licks up Winnie's neck. The first flickers of anger cut through the shock. What I care about is the man I am dating, she says. And the work that I do. I am sorry if that does not fit your files. Catherine's lips thin. She taps the check against Winnie's blueprint. You care about your work. she says. Good. Then you will appreciate this. That little cultural center project you are so proud of sits on land the Walker Group owns, through 3 shell companies. One phone call, one little change of plan, and your contract disappears. The air in the room tightens. Winnie's hand curls slowly around her pencil. The room, the light, the sound of cars outside, all of it narrows to this woman and the piece of paper in her hand. You would sabotage a city project to make a point. Winnie says quietly. I would protect my son. Catherine replies. And the company his father built. You are talented, I will give you that, but talent is not pedigree. You are a girl from nowhere, playing with glass and concrete. My son will inherit an empire. His wife will not be picked from some downtown studio because he liked her sketches. The words land like slaps. Somewhere under the anger, something soft twinges. The memory of late nights in this room, Ethan leaning over her shoulder, laughing, tracing lines on paper. You see this curve, Win? It feels like you. Clean and stubborn and impossible to argue with. Winnie looks down at the check. $10 million could fund her studio for years. She could buy their building, hire a bigger staff, take risks with projects that now only live in her sketchbooks. For one moment, a tiny, bitter part of her wants to take it, just to prove that she could walk away first. Then she looks at where the check lies, right over the atrium she opened up this morning. A white band across a bright, impossible space. Winnie lifts the check between her fingers. She smiles. You came here today to buy me off, she says. But you did not even bother to Google me properly. Catherine's brows pinch. Excuse me. You think my studio is on the edge of collapse. Winnie turns the check over thoughtfully. That $10 million is some golden rescue. It is not. She reaches behind her, plucks a folder from the shelf, and tosses it on the table next to the drawing. Numbers glare up from the top sheet, all black ink and tight columns. We closed the funding round for my expansion last month, Winnie says. The studio is valued at $50 million now. A pathetic sum, I know, compared to Walker Group, but I am not the charity case you built in your head. Catherine's eyes flick to the page. For the first time since she walked in, she looks unsure. Winnie holds the check up between them. You are not offering me freedom, she says. You are trying to pay me to be small. Then she tears. The sound is clean and brutal. Paper ripping down the middle, then again and again. White confetti flutters to the floor, scattering over the concrete, over Catherine's sharp heels. The 2 men at the door shift, startled. Catherine inhales like someone just slapped her. Winnie lets the last shreds fall from her fingers. First, she says calmly. Do not ever put anything on my drawings again. Second, I do not take money to break my own heart. Third, she steps closer, until they are almost the same height. If you really want to protect Walker Group, I suggest you stop wasting time in my studio, and start paying attention to your nephew. Catherine's eyes narrow. What about him? Blair has been sniffing around my investors since last quarter, Winnie says. He asked 2 of them to redirect their capital into some outside fund he controls. Little sloppy with the paperwork too. If I can find it, so can a regulator. One of the men at the door coughs into his fist. Color drains from Catherine's face, then rushes back in hot and furious. You are lying. She snaps. I am an architect, Winnie says. I build things, but I also know how to read a structure when it is rotting from the inside. You want to lecture me about empires? Maybe look at the cracks in your own foundation. Catherine's hand trembles as she points at Winnie. You are out of your place, she hisses. You think standing in a rented box with your little drawings makes you someone. It does not. The bell above the door rings again. This time the footsteps are familiar. Lighter, faster, almost running. Winnie. Ethan calls. I am so sorry, I just got your text. I did not know she was coming here. He bursts into the studio, dark hair mussed from the wind, shirt sleeves rolled to his forearms, eyes moving from the torn paper on the floor to Winnie's rigid shoulders to his mother's flushed face. He stops like he hit a wall. Mom. He says, voice dropping. What did you do? Winnie looks at him. The anger, the hurt, the ridiculous urge to laugh are all tangled in her chest. Your mother brought an offer, she says. I declined. Catherine straightens, mask snapping back over her features. Ethan, she says. We need to talk. Now. He looks from one woman to the other. The air around them hums like the seconds before a storm finally breaks. For the first time since Catherine walked into the studio, Winnie feels something other than fury. She feels the floor tilt. Fine, she says. Talk. She crosses her arms, plants her feet next to her tower, and waits to find out if the man she loves is going to choose her, or the empire he never wanted, but still belongs to. Silence packs into the studio, thick as insulation. Even the traffic noise outside seems to hold its breath. Ethan steps forward, voice low. "Mom," he says. "You were not supposed to come here alone." Catherine's laugh is brittle. "Because you knew I would see this place and panic earlier?" She gestures at the walls, the models, the messy desk, as if they are the crime scene. "Because you knew," she continues, "that once I saw where you have been hiding, I would understand how far this madness has gone." Ethan's jaw flexes. This is not madness. This is Winnie's studio. She built it from nothing. It is one of the few places I have felt like myself in years. The words land warm and heavy in Winnie's chest, even as everything else burns. She lifts one eyebrow. "I am very touched by the compliment," she says. "But maybe we should deal with the part where your mother brought a $10 million check to buy me off." Ethan's hands curl into fists. He turns to Catherine, eyes darker than Winnie has ever seen them. "Tell me you did not," he says. "I did," Catherine answers, meeting his gaze head on. "And I would do it again." She points at the torn scraps of paper on the floor. $10 million is nothing to us," she says. "But that girl," her eyes cut to Winnie, "would have taken it if she was what you claim she is not." "Greedy?" Winnie asks softly. "Desperate, gold-digging. If the word fits," Catherine says. Winnie actually laughs. "Mrs. Walker, if I wanted Walker money, I would not be designing public cultural centers," she says. "I would be applying for positions in your in-house development arm, or calling Blair back when he pretended to be fascinated by cantilevered balconies." Ethan's head snaps toward her. "Blair called you." "Several times," Winnie says. "Always from numbers that mysteriously did not exist a week later." "I assumed you already knew." Color drains from Ethan's face. "I knew he was circling my projects," he says slowly. "I did not know he was bothering you personally. He is only doing what you refuse to do." Catherine mutters. "Taking responsibility for the company." Winnie feels the argument circling the same hole, ready to tumble into 10 years of unresolved mother and son resentment. She does not have the patience for it. She picks up a thick envelope from the corner of the table, flips back the flap, and slides a stapled stack of documents onto the wood between them. "If we are going to throw pieces of paper around," she says, "we should at least compare them." Ethan stares. Catherine blinks, then squints down at the top page. Prenuptial agreement parties. Ethan Walker and Winifred Grant date. Her lips part. She looks up sharply. "What is this?" she asks. "The part where your son is dramatically more reckless than I am," Winnie says. "He brought this over 3 months ago." Ethan clears his throat, the tips of his ears faintly red. "I was going to show you before the holidays," he mutters. "Then the board meeting happened, then the land deal, then you started avoiding my calls, because you refused to pick a wedding date." "I was avoiding your calls, because you were letting your family pretend I did not exist." Winnie shoots back. "I was trying to protect you from exactly this." "And how did that work out?" They both stop, breathing hard, eyes locked. The ridiculousness of fighting in front of Catherine cracks across Winnie's annoyance like lightning. "Right," she says. "We can yell about timing later. For now, maybe your mother should read what you were planning to sign away, without even telling her." Catherine flips the first page, eyes racing over the clauses. The further she reads, the tighter her grip on the paper becomes. Clause 1. Winnie says dryly. "Ethan voluntarily transfers 30% of his personal Walker Group shares into a trust under my name. Not all at once, spread over 5 years. Sensible, if dramatic." Catherine's head jerks up. 30%. She repeats. "Are you insane?" Clause 2. Winnie continues, ignoring her. "Post-marriage, I retain full creative and financial control of Grant Studio. There will be no board seats allocated to Walkers, no veto rights, no interference in client selection." In fact, the contract spells it out 3 times, with slightly different verbs. She taps the page. "I was impressed, honestly," she says. "Most women get offered diamonds. I got offered autonomy in legal language." Ethan looks at her, a flicker of vulnerability beneath the frustration. "You said you would never marry into a family that would eat your career alive," he says. "I believed you. I was not going to show up with a ring and a vague promise. I wanted it in writing, that you would never have to ask permission to be who you are." The words knock the air out of Winnie's lungs for one unguarded second. She swallows. Clause 3. She says, voice rougher than she wants. In the event of infidelity, emotional or physical abandonment, or any other charming breach of trust, Ethan leaves the marriage with nothing but his personal belongings. The rest of his income, assets, and future options revert to me. Catherine drops the pages like they burned her. You would sign this? She demands of her son. You would hand over half your life to a woman you have known less than a year? Yes, Ethan says. The simplicity of it cuts through the room. No hesitation, no flourish. Just a flat, calm yes. Because she is not after my life. He continues. She has her own. She loved me before she found out my last name, remember? I was just another overqualified architect in her studio. She yelled at me the first week for mislabeling a beam detail. Do you honestly think she cares about my board voting rights? Winnie folds her arms tighter, fighting a smile she does not want him to see. Catherine looks between them like she is witnessing a foreign language she refuses to learn. You are naive, she says coldly. Both of you. You think love and contracts will keep the world from tearing you apart. You have no idea how brutal the board, the press, even our own relatives can be. Once this relationship is out in the open, every choice you make will be judged, dissected. Do you really think a girl who builds small cultural centers is ready for that? Ready. Winnie repeats. Memories flash across her mind, fast and sharp. The landlord who tried to triple her rent after their first big project, assuming she would cave. The bank manager who called her a cute dreamer until she put audited numbers on his desk. The anonymous blog that accused her of sleeping with a city council member for a contract, even though she had never met the man. She had survived all of that without a billionaire boyfriend in her corner. I am not asking for your approval, she says. I am telling you I am not going anywhere. Catherine lifts her chin. That is where you are wrong. Because if you do not take my money and disappear, I will make sure every door you need to walk through goes dark. Heat surges up Ethan's throat. That is enough, he says sharply. You threaten my girlfriend in her own studio, you threaten her work, and then you expect me to go home to dinner like nothing happened. I will not. He turns to Winnie. Win, he says quietly. Give me the contract. She hesitates, then hands it to him. Ethan pulls a pen from his pocket. His hand is steady as he bends over the table and signs his name on the last page, ink sliding across paper in bold strokes. He straightens and flips the document so the signature faces his mother. Done, he says. I will have our lawyers notarize and register it in the morning. You can read it again at home. You might want to show it to Blair too. It affects him more than you think. You cannot be serious, Catherine whispers. Ethan's jaw clenches. You raised me to be, he says. You put me in meetings when I was 13, made me practice speeches in front of your charity boards, drilled into my head that my word and my name were everything. I meant it when I told you I wanted to marry Winnie. I am not a child you can bribe away from a toy. Winnie sucks in a breath. Something unsteady and fierce thrums in her chest. Catherine looks at her son like she is seeing a stranger. You would give up your inheritance, she says. For her. I would restructure it. Ethan corrects. Walker Group will still be fine. It is a machine with a life of its own. But I will not live my entire life the way you planned mine on a napkin when I was 6. Winnie is the first thing I chose for myself that you did not pick, vet, or approve of. That matters to me. For a brief second, pain flashes through Catherine's expression. Then the walls slam back up. If you go through with this, she says, do not expect me to fight your battles for you when the board turns on you. Ethan's smile is sharp. Oh, I am counting on that. She stares. I have been the ghost in this company for years, he says. Designing under a different name, testing systems from the ground floor up. The board thinks I am a soft artist because I stayed off the front page. They have no idea how many of their pet projects I quietly killed before they could bankrupt us. He glances at Winnie, eyes gleaming. You told me once that the only way to fix a crooked building is to strip it back to the beams, he says. I took that to heart. Winnie's throat tightens. She had said that over takeout on the floor, arms aching from hauling models. Catherine looks between them, trapped between fury and a fear she refuses to show. This is not over, she says finally. The investors, the extended family, the press, they will not accept this. Then we will show them something they cannot ignore, Winnie says. She steps around the table, straightens a set of mock UPS against the wall, and taps the one in the middle. The cultural center rises from a blank plaza, all clean glass and public terraces. Her design, her gamble. You walked in here thinking I was some girl hanging on to your son for a ticket to the top, she says. Let me make something very clear. With or without Ethan, I was going to build a city that has my name in its bones. You can stand in the way for a while, but not forever. The conviction in her voice surprises even her. There is no bravado, no show, just fact. Ethan looks at her like someone seeing the future instead of the fight in front of them. Catherine holds Winnie's gaze for a long, brittle stretch of time. Then she turns to the door. This conversation is not finished, she says over her shoulder. The next time we have it, it will not be in this little box. I look forward to the change of scenery. Winnie replies. The bell chimes as Catherine leaves, security shadows slipping out behind her. The studio door swings shut. The room exhales. For a moment, neither Winnie nor Ethan moves. Then he runs a hand through his hair, laughs once without humor, and leans back against the drafting table. Well, he says. That could have gone worse. Winnie stares at him. Your mother tried to buy me, she says. You signed away a third of your company in front of her to prove a point, and you think that could have gone worse. She could have brought my grandmother, he says. Trust me, this was the lighter version. Despite herself, a short laugh barks out of Winnie's chest. It dies quickly. Her eyes drop to the signed contract on the table. You did not ask, she says quietly. Ask what? He says. If I even want this, she says, tapping the contract with one finger. If I am ready to marry into this mess. If I am willing to be the woman everyone thinks destroyed the perfect Walker family dynamic. His face softens. I thought you were, he says. I thought when you told me you loved me, you understood that I do not come with a simple life. I did, she says. I do. But watching your mother tear apart my studio with her eyes, hearing how easily she threatened to crush everything I built, I realized something. She meets his gaze, heart pounding. If I do this, she says, I am not going to play the quiet, grateful wife. I am not going to smile at fundraisers while your relatives whisper that I trapped you. If we go public, if we sign this, I am going to fight for my place with the same aggression I use on my projects. A slow grin ghosts across his mouth. That is exactly what I am counting on, he says. Good, she says. Because I am also going to expose every crack your cousin has hammered into your company, and I will do it on record. Your family will hate me before they tolerate me. You need to be sure you are okay with that. He pushes away from the table, comes to stand in front of her, close enough that she has to tilt her chin up. I am more than okay with it, he says. I am tired of being the reasonable one. You can be the storm. I will be the infrastructure. Terrible metaphor, she mutters. Architect romantic language. He counters. Her mouth twitches. He sobers, reaches for her hands. Win, he says. I know today was ugly. I am sorry I did not stop her from coming. I am sorry she treated you like a problem instead of the best thing that has happened to me in years. I cannot promise you that my family will ever be easy, but I can promise you this. There is no version of my life after this where I choose them over you. Something in her, some last rigid line, gives way with a quiet crack. You had better mean that, she says. Because the next few months are going to be hell. He smiles, relief sparking in his eyes. So, he says. Is that a yes? She looks at the contract, at his name next to hers, at the ridiculous clauses that somehow feel less absurd now. It is a maybe, she says. Pending performance review. He laughs, head dropping forward against her shoulder. His breath is warm against her neck. I will take that, he murmurs. She lets herself rest against him for 3 heartbeats, just long enough to remember why she is doing this. Then she pulls back. Performance review starts tomorrow, she says, picking up the cultural center model. Because if your mother makes good on her threat, Blair will go after this project first. And I am not going to let him win on my site. Ethan's expression sharpens. Then we should get ahead of him, he says. I will call legal and risk. You call your engineers. If they want a war, we will give them one. Winnie nods. For the first time since Catherine walked in with that check, she feels something like certainty. They are going to build something out of this. Not just a tower, a life. 3 weeks later, the skeleton of the cultural center rises from its foundation, steel beams catching the winter sun. Cranes swing overhead. Workers shout to each other over the grind of machinery. The site smells like concrete dust and coffee in paper cups. Winnie stands in a hard hat and neon vest at the edge of the chaos, clipboard in hand, eyes on the delivery trucks rumbling through the gate. Load 3, you are late, she calls, checking the manifest. We cannot pour that slab without the rest of the framing. Where have you been? The foreman shrugs, annoyed but wary. Warehouse backup. Our supplier said your order got bumped down the list. Funny, Winnie says. Because we confirmed that order 2 weeks ago, and they promised us priority status. She flips to a printed email thread clipped to the board. The company logo glares up at her. Ridgeway Steel, the same firm Walker Group uses for half their commercial projects. A prickle crawls up the back of her neck. Fine, she says. Unload and stage it. Nobody bolts anything until we finish testing. I want samples from every batch. The foreman opens his mouth, closes it again when he sees her expression. Got it, he mutters. When he walks away, Ethan steps up beside her, hard hat tilted low, hands in his pockets. You heard the part where his voice went weird when he said warehouse backup? Ethan says. I heard, she says. And the part where Ridgeway Steel suddenly forgot how priority works. He glances at the stacks of beams on the truck bed. From this distance, they look fine. Solid, identical. Winnie knows better than to trust the surface. I am going to have the lab run stress tests this afternoon, she says. If there is anything off, we will have proof. And if there is nothing off? He asks. Then we wasted a few hours and annoyed a supplier, she says. I can live with that. What I cannot live with is a headline about a cultural center collapsing because someone decided to shave costs and expected me not to notice. Ethan's jaw tightens. You think this is Blair, he says. I think your cousin has been quietly pushing Ridgeway on every Walker project for years, she says. And I think the minute your mother stopped answering his calls, he looked for the weakest point he could hit. That is probably the woman borrowing your last name without permission. He winces. She has never actually said that out loud. She does not have to, Winnie says. You should see her face when people ask what I do. It is like she swallowed a lemon and cannot confess. He huffs out a laugh. Good news, he says. If this is Blair, he is sloppy. I found a chain of emails between him and Ridgeway about pricing adjustments. Nothing illegal yet, but the tone screams we do things under the table. Send it to the lab, she says. If these beams fail, I want to walk into that boardroom with both sets of receipts. By the end of the day, the lab results sit on her desk, numbers highlighted in red. The steel is substandard. Not by much, just enough to shave cost and eat into the safety margin. Ethan stares at the page. Jesus, he says. If you had not checked, we would have built half the frame with this garbage. We caught it, she says. That is what matters. What matters, he says, anger simmering beneath his calm tone. Is that someone thought they could sneak this past you, past us. He pulls his phone from his pocket. Who are you calling? She asks. Ridgeway, he says. And then Blair. Within 24 hours, a scandal breaks in the business press. Anonymous sources, which Winnie strongly suspects are the risk department Ethan weaponized, leak that Ridgeway Steel attempted to sell substandard material to a high-profile city project. The article mentions safety concerns, internal emails, and an unnamed architect who refused to sign off on the shipment. 2 days later, the city inspector visits the site, examines the replacement beams, and issues a glowing statement about Grant Studios' dedication to safety and transparency. By the following week, every investor who had nervously called to ask whether the headlines were true is now praising Winnie's caution. Which is exactly when the second blow lands. An online gossip column runs a photo of Winnie and Ethan entering her building together after midnight. The caption calls her the mysterious girlfriend of reclusive heir Ethan Walker and speculates about conflict of interest on the cultural center project. Within hours, the article is everywhere. Winnie's phone buzzes non-stop with texts from friends, clients, and a college roommate who has not spoken to her in 4 years but suddenly wants coffee. Ethan reads the piece on his laptop at her kitchen counter, jaw clenched. They dug up my trust filings, he says. Blair must have given them a breadcrumb. Nobody else knew we registered the prenup terms yet. So now the world knows I could end up with 30% of Walker Group if you cheat, Winnie says, staring at the ceiling. That is fun. She can almost feel Catherine's fury radiating across the Upper East Side. Her phone rings. Catherine's name flashes on the screen. Winnie answers before she can think better of it. Yes, she says. You need to make a statement. Catherine says without preamble. Her voice is tight. You need to deny any conflict of interest with the cultural center, step back from the project publicly, and say that your relationship with Ethan will not affect your work. No, Winnie says. The silence on the line is instantaneous and icy. Excuse me, Catherine says. I am not stepping back, Winnie says. And I am not feeding the narrative that I am some scheming nobody who clawed her way into your house through a construction site. The board is furious. Catherine hisses. They are asking why they were not informed, why the public knows about a contract they have never seen. They feel blindsided. They were never entitled to approve who Ethan dates, Winnie says. Or who he marries. You do not understand, Catherine says. They will use this to paint him as unstable, selfish. They will say you are distracting him from his duties. They will say you are using city funds to secure your personal future. Then we will give them something else to talk about, Winnie says. What could possibly counter this? Catherine demands. A building. Winnie answers. And a presentation. 2 days later, she stands in front of a row of cameras at the site, hard hat off, wind tugging at her hair, the skeleton of the cultural center towering behind her. Reporters shout questions, mics thrust forward. Miss Grant, are you engaged to Ethan Walker? Are you using this project to funnel funds to Walker Group? Are the prenup details in that article true? She holds up a hand, smile calm and sharp. Today, she says, I am here as the lead architect on this project. My personal life does not change the science of steel or the math of load-bearing walls. But since everyone is so interested in the truth, let us talk about it. She gestures to the massive screen set up behind her, where slides flicker into life. She walks them through the design, the sustainability features, the accessibility studies, the community outreach. She lays out, in clear numbers and charts, how much money was saved by catching the steel issue early, how much more the city would have paid if Grant Studio had quietly used the substandard material, and hoped for the best. At every stage, she says, we chose transparency over convenience. When we discovered irregularities, we reported them immediately. We accepted delays and cost overruns rather than compromise safety. That is what you deserve as citizens and as users of this space. A hand shoots up. Are you confirming that the Walker family is involved in funding this project? A reporter asks. I am confirming that the land was owned by one of their subsidiaries. She says. That was disclosed in the original bid. Walker Group recuses itself from all decisions involving construction materials or contractors for this site. Our contracts are with the city. That will not change. And your relationship with Mr. Walker? Another calls. Is that not a conflict? She looks straight into the nearest camera. My relationship with Ethan Walker does not change my professional standards. She says. If anything, it puts them under a microscope. So let me be very clear. If I believed Walker Group was compromising this project, I would call it out publicly. My loyalty is to the people who will walk through these doors, not to a last name. Somewhere on the Upper East Side, Catherine probably chokes on her tea. The press conference runs on loop for the rest of the day. Commentators argue about ethics and love and class. The gossip column tries to twist her words, but the footage is too clean, too direct. By evening, social media feeds are full of side-by-side clips of her tearing into the steel scandal and smiling at a question about love, captions calling her the architect who refuses to be bought. Ethan watches from the back of the crowd, heart pounding, pride and fear tangled into one sharp knot. She just declared war on us on live television. One board member mutters beside him, not realizing he is close enough to hear. Or she just saved our reputation. Another counters quietly. People like her. That is rare in our world. Ethan almost smiles. Later, in her studio, Winnie kicks off her boots, drops onto the couch, and throws an arm over her eyes. I think my face forgot how to smile. She groans. It hurts. Ethan sits beside her, gently pulls her feet into his lap, and starts rubbing slow circles into her arches. You were brilliant, he says. The board is divided, which is their natural state, but even the crankiest ones had to admit you know how to handle a crisis. They only care because they think I am tied to your shares. She mutters. Let them, he says. Their greed is a leash. You can tug when you want. She lowers her arm enough to look at him. You realize what you just said makes you sound like the villain in a prestige drama. She says. I have been working with your cousin for 10 years. He says. Some of it rubs off. The difference is I have you as my moral compass. That is terrifying. She says, but her mouth curves. His expression softens. They are calling for an emergency board meeting. He says. Blair is pushing for a vote on my competency and my conflict of interest. He wants to paint me as reckless. He is projecting. She says. Reckless is ordering cheap steel and hoping it passes inspection. Reckless is leaking family contracts to gossip blogs. I will need you there. He says. Not as my girlfriend. As the woman who caught the steal, handled the press, and can look 12 old men in the eye without blinking. She sits up, tucking her feet under her. You want me in your boardroom, she says slowly. I want you at the front of it, he says. With a flash drive full of those slides you used today. They understand revenue and risk better than they understand love. Her stomach flips, part fear, part adrenaline. All right, she says. I can do that, on one condition. Name it, he says. Afterward, if we survive, she says. You are cooking dinner, no catering, no private chef, no takeout, just you, a grocery store, and a recipe that does not involve reheating something your housekeeper pre-cooked. His eyes widen. That is cruel. You want a storm, she says. Welcome to the maintenance phase. He laughs, leaning in to kiss her forehead. Deal, he murmurs. He does not tell her that Catherine called him twice during the press conference and did not leave a message. He does not tell her that his mother requested a private meeting before the board vote. He knows that in the next room where he will stand, the real battle is only just beginning. But when Winnie walks into that boardroom, he also knows the days of being the quiet, invisible heir are over. He is done hiding, so is she. The Walker Group boardroom sits on the top floor of a glass tower, all cold marble and quiet wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows frame Manhattan like a painting. A long table of dark wood slices through the center of the room, surrounded by leather chairs and men and women who have never taken the subway in their lives. Winnie walks in wearing a black suit that fits like armor, and heels she can actually stand in for hours. Her hair is pulled back into a smooth knot. A slim laptop rests under her arm. She can feel their eyes on her, weighing and measuring. Some of these people have seen her on site in a hard hat. Others only know her from the gossip blog headlines and the press conference that kept replaying over breakfast. Ethan stands near the head of the table, hands in his pockets, tie loosened just enough to make him look dangerous instead of sloppy. At his right, Catherine sits in her usual chair, posture perfect, expression neutral. Blair lounges 3 seats down, expensive suit perfectly pressed, smile thin and sharp. Glad you could join us, he says when Winnie takes the open seat next to Ethan. I am curious what inside and outside architect can bring to this discussion. His tone turns the word outside into something dirty. Probably more insight than cheap steel can. Winnie says pleasantly. But we will see. A few board members hide smiles behind their water glasses. The chairman clears his throat. Let us get started, he says. We are here to address 3 issues. First, the allegations regarding Ridgeway Steel and supply quality. Second, the impact of Mr. Walker's personal relationship with Miss Grant on company reputation and operations. Third, the concerns raised by Mr. Blair Walker regarding recent shifts in voting power. The last phrase hangs in the air like a bad smell. Before we dive in, Ethan says quickly, Miss Grant has a presentation that will address the first 2 points more clearly than any rumor report. I have asked her here not as my partner, but as the lead on one of our most visible current projects. Blair spreads his hands in mock consent. By all means, he says. Let the woman whose face is on the front page explain why our stock dropped 3 points yesterday. Winnie ignores him. She plugs her laptop into the screen input. The wall behind her lights up with the first slide. For the next 20 minutes, she walks them through the same story she told the press, only this time with more teeth. She shows them the steel stress tests, the emails from Ridgeway hinting at price cuts tied to quiet flexibility. The revised timeline that will cost Walker Group money now, but save them from lawsuits later. She keeps her voice measured, professional. She does not mention late-night arguments or nerve-wracking phone calls. She keeps everything anchored in numbers and risk. This, she says finally, highlighting a graph, is your liability exposure if we pretend none of this happened and keep working with Ridgeway the way Mr. Blair's proposal suggested. This, she switches slides, is your exposure if we cut ties, eat the short-term pain, and rebuild with suppliers who meet actual safety standards. The second bar is dramatically lower, even without considering the human factor, she says. The smart move is obvious. The room hums with murmurs, a few nods. Someone scribbles on a legal pad. Blair leans back in his chair, pretending boredom. How touching, he drawls when she finishes. You are very good at making yourself look like a hero, Miss Grant. But the problem is not just your steel. It is your sleeping arrangements. Careful, Ethan says, voice silky with warning. Blair smiles wider. The market is not kind to men who look like they are handing the keys to the kingdom to a girlfriend barely out of grad school. He says, Investors are nervous. They call me, you know. They are not sure our heir is thinking with the right part of his anatomy. A few older men shift uncomfortably. Catherine's knuckles whiten around her pen. And then there is this little tidbit. Blair continues, pulling a folder from his briefcase with a flourish. A prenuptial agreement that would transfer 30% of Ethan's shares into Miss Grant's control. 30%. Enough to sway every vote in this room. He slaps the folder onto the table. Tell me, cousin, he says. Did you intend to inform the board before half your power vanished into a downtown architecture loft? It is not half, Ethan says calmly. And it is not vanishing. It is being placed in trust with someone whose interests align with mine more than some of you in this room. You cannot be serious, Blair says, incredulous laughter bubbling up. You are willing to risk this company for a woman you met on a job site. I am willing to structure my life so that the company does not own me. Ethan replies. You would know nothing about that, because every decision you make starts with your own reflection. The chairman clears his throat again, louder this time. Gentlemen, he says. We are drifting. We are not, Blair says. This is exactly the point. Ethan's decisions are erratic, emotional. He is exposing us to risk to protect a woman who is already costing us in public relations. If he were anyone else, we would be questioning his fitness to lead. He looks around, catching eyes, letting the implications sink in. I am calling for a vote, he says, on whether Ethan remains designated successor and chief design officer. The temperature in the room drops. Catherine stiffens. Blair, this is not appropriate, she says. With respect, Aunt. He replies smoothly. It is exactly appropriate. We owe it to the company, and to Uncle Thomas's legacy, to be honest. He turns back to the table. I have prepared a report, he says, on Ethan's recent choices, the projects he has blocked, the money he has turned down for the sake of personal ideals. It is all very noble. It is also costing us growth. He snaps his fingers and an assistant steps in, distributing copies. Winnie does not reach for one. She already knows what is in it. Ethan had shown her the drafts he found on the internal server. Half-truths, twisted numbers, big bets framed as reckless gambles instead of the careful corrections they were. Before we vote, Ethan says quietly, I want 30 seconds. The chairman nods. You have them, he says. Ethan stands, buttoning his jacket. He looks more like a chief executive now than he ever did in the carefully curated photos the company used when they needed a pretty face. I did not want this job, he begins. Most of you know that. When my father died, everyone expected me to step into his suit and smile for the cameras. I stepped sideways instead. I went to work in the field, under another name, because I wanted to know what we actually build, not just what the quarterly reports say we do. He glances at Winnie for a heartbeat, then back at the board. In the last 5 years, he continues, I have quietly killed or redirected 13 projects that would have made us fast money and long-term disgrace. Luxury condos on floodplains, office towers with laughable fire plans. You signed off on them because the numbers looked good. I took them apart because I did not want my father's name on a future obituary. A few faces flush. I kept my name off those decisions so you could pretend they were committee calls, he says. I let Blair parade his numbers because it kept the board off my back while I fixed the worst structural rot in our pipeline. I have no illusions about how much some of you respect me. I know you think I am soft because I did not take the obvious throne. He lets the silence settle. Well, he says, here we are. You want to judge my fitness to lead. Fine, but do it with all the information, not just what my cousin cherry-picked. He nods at Winnie. She taps her keyboard. New slides flash up. Charts, timelines, project lists, red lines through proposals that would have led to lawsuits, disasters, or front-page disasters. These, Ethan says, are the projects I blocked. These are the ones I pushed through instead. They are smaller, slower, less flashy. They also carry less risk, more stability, and more goodwill from the city. You can pretend this was luck, or you can admit that maybe, just maybe, I know what I am doing. He takes a breath. As for my relationship with Miss Grant, he says, yes, I am in love with her. Yes, I am planning to marry her. Yes, I signed a contract that gives her legal power over a chunk of my shares if I betray her. If you think that makes me unstable, that is your right. Personally, I think a man who is willing to put his money where his promises are is less of a risk than one who treats his vows like polite suggestions. A murmur runs around the table. An older woman at the far end raises her brows approvingly. And if you are afraid she will use that power to wreck this place. He adds, I invite you to ask who just saved us from a steel scandal, and who has been trying to bury it under gossip columns. His gaze slices to Blair, all eyes follow. Blair's smile has thinned to a hard line. That is a pretty speech, he says. But it does not change the fact that you kept us in the dark. You made unilateral choices. You prioritized your personal moral compass over shareholder value. That is not leadership. That is ego. Winnie steps in before Ethan can answer. If you want to talk about unilateral choices, she says, we should talk about the offshore fund Mr. Walker has been funneling company money into. She drops a new folder on the table. Numbers spill out, printed and highlighted. For the record, she adds, I mean Mr. Blair Walker. The room goes very still. This is not relevant. Blair snaps. It is extremely relevant, she says. Because while you have been painting Ethan as reckless, you have been moving funds into a vehicle in your sole control. No oversight, no reporting. You planned to pitch it as a bold new direction once you had more power. But to get there, you needed Ethan out of the way and the board scared. She clicks the remote again. Emails bloom across the screen, red boxes around key phrases. We pulled these from your company account, she says. A subpoena will not be necessary. One board member swears under his breath. Another leans forward, eyes flinty. You have been using Ridgeway and other suppliers as leverage. Winnie continues, promising them more contracts in exchange for better terms on your private fund. That is not just unethical. It is grounds for removal. Blair's face drains of color, then fills with furious red. You hacked me, he says. No, Ethan says. You used your company email for private schemes. That means the data is owned by Walker Group. Legal, do you see any reason we cannot continue reading? The general counsel shakes his head slowly, eyes never leaving the papers. None, he says. In fact, I strongly suggest we do. For the next 40 minutes, the board dissects Blair's secret empire. Every attempt he makes to reframe the numbers falls apart under close questioning. The more he squirms, the calmer Ethan becomes. Catherine says nothing. She just watches her nephew unravel, her son stand taller, and the woman she once tried to buy out hold the room's attention, like a seasoned litigator. Finally, the chairman leans back. I think we have seen enough, he says. We will vote on 2 motions. First, whether Mr. Blair Walker should remain on this board. Second, whether we maintain confidence in Mr. Ethan Walker as successor. The votes are not close. Blair is removed, effective immediately, pending a full investigation. Ethan is confirmed, with an added note of appreciation for his risk management in recent years. When the last hands lower, Blair snatches up his briefcase. You think this is the end? He spits, glaring at Ethan and Winnie. You two have no idea how this world works. You just made enemies you cannot even see. Correction, Winnie says mildly. We just removed one we could. Security appears at the doorway. This time, they are not on Catherine's side. They are on the company's. As Blair is escorted out, the room hums with a different energy. Relief, respect, wariness, but the right kind. One of the older board members clears his throat. Miss Grant, he says. You handled yourself well today. Have you ever considered a seat on any advisory committees? Thank you, she says. But I already have a full-time job. His mouth quirks. If you ever change your mind, he says, call me. Catherine stands slowly as the room begins to empty. Winnie, she says. The use of her first name is so startling that Winnie actually turns around to make sure there is not another Winifred standing behind her. Yes, she says carefully. Catherine looks at her for a long moment. The usual weapons in her gaze are dulled, not gone, but sharpened toward something else. I misjudged you, Catherine says finally. Spectacularly. Winnie does not rush to soften it. She just nods once. You loved my son before you knew what he could give you, Catherine says. You defended your work without hiding behind his name. And today, you saved us from a scandal that could have stained this company for decades. She takes a breath that sounds, to Winnie's ears, like surrender and stubborn pride braided together. I am not good at apologies, Catherine says. I was raised to treat them as weakness. But I will say this, I am glad my son chose a woman who will stand beside him, not behind him. Even if that means I am not always comfortable at dinner. A laugh bubbles up in Winnie's chest, surprising and genuine. I am not good at bowing my head, she says. I was raised to fight for every inch of space I take up, so I cannot promise you I will ever be the kind of daughter-in-law who nods and smiles, and does what she is told. I would not believe you if you did. Catherine says dryly. They look at each other, two women used to holding ground on opposite sides, wondering what it would be like to stand on the same one. Come to dinner, Catherine says suddenly. Winnie blinks. Tonight. Tomorrow. Catherine amends. I suspect you are exhausted, but soon, we will tell the extended family in person. If they are going to talk, they might as well have the correct version of the story. You want to announce our engagement at dinner, Ethan says, drifting back to them with a faint smile. Mom, that is almost romantic. Do not push it, Catherine says, but there is no real bite in her tone. Winnie glances at Ethan. Is this part of my performance review? She asks. Meeting the relatives who send long emails about share prices. Yes, he says. But I pay in kisses and stock options. Sold, she says. Catherine makes a face at the affection, but Winnie sees the way her shoulders have eased, the way the lines around her eyes have softened. For the first time, walking out of that boardroom into the bright hallway, Winnie feels the shape of what she and Ethan are building. Not just a career and a company, a new version of this family. One where power is not a weapon handed down, but something earned, shared, and sometimes argued over at the table until everyone is satisfied the structure will hold. Architect romantic language, indeed. Walker Manor sits on a hill above the river, all stone and glass and generations of carefully curated grandeur. The drive curves through tall trees and past a fountain that throws light around like confetti. The house itself glows in the dusk, every window a warm square in the winter dark. Winnie stares up at it from the passenger seat of Ethan's car, fingers drumming against her knees. It looks like a movie set, she says. The kind where the heroine runs away before dessert. You are allowed to run away, Ethan says. We just have to agree on a signal. Flip your fork twice and I will stage a diversion. What kind of diversion? She asks. I do not know, he says. Small fire, sudden fainting spell, dramatic confession of long hidden secrets. She snorts. That last one is just family dinner with you people, she says. He laughs, leans over to kiss her knuckles. You do not have to impress them, he says. You have nothing to prove. That is comforting, she says. Considering your cousin is probably hiding in the bushes with a camera, he is under investigation and banned from the house. Ethan says. If he is in the bushes, security will arrest him before he can get his phone out. That is somehow more frightening. She mutters, but her mouth quirks. Inside, the manor is a study in quiet money. Plush rugs, muted art, family portraits that stop before Ethan's generation, as if the story paused there. Staff glide in the background, polite and invisible. Catherine waits at the base of the sweeping staircase, dressed in deep blue. She looks like she always has composed, sharp, formidable. But there is a flicker of something else in her eyes when she sees them. Winifred, she says. Winnie takes a breath. Good evening, Mrs. Walker. Catherine, she corrects. If you are going to marry my son, we should stop pretending we are strangers. The word marry lands like a pebble in a still lake. Ripples. Possibilities. Catherine. Winnie repeats slowly. All right. Catherine studies her for a heartbeat, then nods once, as if something inside her finally clicks into place. Everyone is in the dining room, she says. They have been dying to meet you. Try not to let them see you sweat. It encourages them. That is advice or a threat? Winnie asks under her breath. Both. Ethan murmurs back, grinning. The dining room is long and bright, a table big enough for 20. Tonight it holds 10 aunts, uncles, cousins, spouses. People who share the Walker bone structure in different arrangements of cheekbones and jawlines. Conversation hushes when Winnie walks in on Ethan's arm. Everyone, Catherine says, voice carrying easily. This is Winifred Grant, Winnie, Ethan's fiancée. The word is out there now, public, solid, impossible to shove back into silence. Fiancée. Aunt Lydia, who has known Winnie from charity circles, smiles warmly. It is nice to finally meet the woman who made Ethan show up to parties with something other than his laptop, she says. Uncle Robert, who cares more about numbers than faces, nods curtly. Welcome, he says. You saved us several $1 million last quarter. I am inclined to like you for that alone. A younger cousin squints at Winnie, recognition dawning. Wait, she says. You are the architect from that press conference. The one who roasted the reporter who asked if you were sleeping your way into the contract. I saw the clip on TikTok. Winnie groans internally. I did not roast him, she says. I politely reminded him that I have a degree and a license. He burst into tears. The cousin says. That counts as roasting. Laughter ripples around the table. The tension shifts, loosens. Not everyone is delighted. A few older relatives exchange looks, measuring and recalculating their predictions. But nobody says anything openly hostile. Not with Catherine sitting at the head of the table watching them like a hawk. Dinner begins. Plates appear, wine is poured, polite conversation floats above the clink of cutlery. "So, Winnie," Aunt Lydia says, "how did you and Ethan meet?" "In a stairwell," Winnie says. "He spilled coffee on my blueprints. I told him that if he touched my drawings again I would make sure he never got hired in this city. He asked me out for coffee an hour later. You threatened his career, and he took it as a love language." The younger cousin says, "Honestly, that tracks." Ethan clears his throat. "I was undercover," he says. "She had no idea who I was and I liked it that way." "You liked being yelled at," Winnie corrects. "I liked being treated like a person instead of a title," he says. The yelling was a bonus. More laughter. A few curious glances at Catherine, who rolls her eyes, but does not object. Halfway through the main course, the first real test arrives. A distant cousin with too much cologne and not enough tact leans back in his chair, swirling his wine. "So, Winnie," he says, drawl thick, "now that you are joining the family, I assume you will not have to tire yourself out with all that construction work." Winnie lifts her gaze slowly. "Construction work," she repeats. "You know," he says. "Hard hats and scaffolding. You can relax now. Focus on the important things. Charity galas, organizing the household staff, producing heirs." A tight smile tugs at her mouth. "I enjoy my work," she says. "And my studio currently brings in enough revenue to fund several charity galas a year. If anyone wants to relax, I suggest they start there." Aunt Lydia snorts into her napkin. Uncle Robert actually chuckles. The cousin flushes. "I just meant," he begins. "I know exactly what you meant," Winnie says. "You meant that in your mind, being Mrs. Ethan Walker is the promotion and my career is the hobby. That is not how we are structuring things." "Structuring," Uncle Robert repeats, amused. She really did find a woman who speaks in project terms. Catherine lifts her glass. "To structuring," she says. Glasses clink. The cousin shuts up. Conversation flows again, lighter now, with fewer barbed hooks. Later, when dessert is cleared and people drift toward the sitting room for coffee, Catherine catches Winnie's elbow. "Walk with me," she says. They slip out onto the terrace, the winter air crisp against their faces. The city lights shimmer in the distance. "For the record," Catherine says, "I would have told him off faster than you did. I was trying to be polite," Winnie says. "I did promise Ethan I would not start a knife fight at dinner." "Shame," Catherine says dryly. Some of them could use the wake-up call. They stand in silence for a moment, watching their breath cloud in the air. "I was hard on you," Catherine says at last. "Too hard." Winnie glances at her. "You brought a check to my office to buy me off. I would classify that as more than hard." Catherine winces, but her eyes stay on the city. "I panicked," she says. "I saw my son falling for someone outside of the plan I had drawn for him, and I reverted to the only tools I trusted. Money. Control. It was easier to believe you were a threat than to admit his life was never actually mine to design." The honesty in her voice is unexpected and raw. "I am used to being the one other people fear," Catherine continues. "You did not flinch. You ripped up the check and told me to look at my own house. It was infuriating. But effective," Winnie says. "But effective." Catherine agrees. She turns to face her fully. "I am not going to pretend I am suddenly a different person," she says. "I will worry. I will meddle. I will host dinners that feel like interrogations. That is who I am. But I will not undermine you. Not in public, not in private. If we disagree, we will do it directly." Winnie considers her, weighing the promise. "That is more than most people get from their mother-in-law," she says. "I can work with direct." "Good," Catherine says. "Because this family needs new blood. People who are not afraid to tell us when we are being idiots." "Ethan does that," Winnie says. "He is selective," Catherine says. "You are not." Winnie laughs. From inside, a burst of laughter spills out, followed by Ethan's voice calling her name. "We should get back," Catherine says. "If we stay out here too long, they will assume I threw you in the fountain." "Have you ever thrown anyone in the fountain?" Winnie asks. "Not sober," Catherine says. "Come on." Back inside, Ethan catches Winnie's eye across the room. For a moment, the noise and the relatives and the weight of the house fall away. It is just him and her, and the quiet question in his gaze, "Are you all right?" She smiles. She is more than all right. For the first time, this house feels less like a test, and more like a place they might one day walk into without armor. Later that night, when they finally escape to Ethan's apartment, she drops onto his couch with a groan. "My face is going to freeze in this polite smile," she says. "You will have to pry it off with a spatula." He drops beside her, pulls her feet into his lap again. "You were perfect," he says. "My uncle tried to get you to commit to naming a child after him, and you dodged like a politician. I said we were not naming hypothetical children after anyone until we saw their faces." She says. "That is just practical." He laughs, then sobers. "My mom spoke to me in the kitchen," he says. "She said she was wrong about you. She said she is glad I picked someone who will never let me get away with anything." Winnie raises her brows. "That is high praise," she says. In Catherine language, that is a standing ovation," he says. They sit in comfortable silence for a moment, the aftertaste of the evening settling. "You know," she says quietly, "a year ago, my biggest problem was whether I could afford another assistant to handle the new projects. Now I am engaged to a man with a manner and a board that debates my ethics over breakfast." "Regrets?" he asks. "Only that I did not build them for my time today," she says. He laughs, then his expression turns serious. "Win," he says. "We do not have to rush the wedding, or the press releases, or anything. We can still choose the pace." She looks at him, at the lines of worry and hope around his eyes. "I know," she says. "But there is something I want to do sooner rather than later." "What?" he asks. She leans forward, grabs the notepad off his coffee table, and starts drawing quick boxes and arrows. "I want to formalize the partnership between my studio and Walker Group," she says. "Not as your fiancé, as an equal. A joint research institute on sustainable urban design. We split funding. We split credit. We use it to train a generation of architects who do not have to pick between ethics and paying rent." His eyes light. "You have been thinking about this," he says. "For months," she admits. "I was afraid to bring it up, because I did not want anyone to say I was freeloading off your last name. But after the last few weeks, I realized something." "What?" he asks. "If people are going to talk anyway," she says, "we might as well give them something worth talking about." He grins. "Walker Grant Institute," he says slowly. "It has a ring to it. We can workshop the name," she says. "But the point stands. If we are going to be tied together in the public eye, let us build something tangible out of it. Not just gossip, concrete, glass, scholarships." He leans in and kisses her, soft and sure. "That," he murmurs, "is why I signed that contract. Because I am good at naming institutes," she says. "Because when you look at my world," he says, "you do not see a throne. You see a building that still needs work." She smiles against his mouth. "Then we had better get to work," she says. "Tomorrow," he says. "Tonight, I owe you dinner." She groans, remembering. "Right," she says. "Your terrifying promise to cook." He stands, claps his hands once. "Prepare to be amazed," he says. "Or mildly poisoned. Why does this feel riskier than the board vote?" She mutters. He disappears into the kitchen, banging drawers. She hears the fridge open, the sound of eggs being set on the counter. Despite the chaos of the last few weeks, the threat of scandal, and the weight of legacy, she feels something simple rise in her chest. Joy. This is what they are fighting for. Not just board victories and headlines. But nights like this. Two people in a small city apartment, plotting their next big build over badly scrambled eggs, and laughter that refuses to be quiet. A year later, the cultural center stands finished, glass catching the mid-morning sun, steel beams clean and strong, plazas full of people. Kids run through the open space. Musicians test the acoustics on the outdoor stage. A mural on the side wall glows with color, a collaborative piece by local artists and students. Inside the main hall, cameras flash. Flowers line the aisle, simple and elegant. Rows of chairs are filled with faces from both of their world's city officials, architects, walkers in tailored suits, friends in borrowed dresses and scuffed shoes. At the far end, under an arch of greenery and steel rods welded into a graceful curve, Ethan waits in a dark suit, no tie, hands folded loosely in front of him. His expression is a blend of disbelief and certainty. "Stop fidgeting," his best man murmurs. "I am not fidgeting," Ethan says. "I am calibrating." You are recalibrating your entire life. The best man says. You are allowed to fidget. The music shifts. Everyone rises. Winnie steps into the hall on her own 2 feet. No one on her arm. Her dress is simple and architectural, clean lines, sharp angles at the shoulders, a skirt that moves like a quiet wave when she walks. Tiny embroidered patterns trace the seams, abstract echoes of floor plans only she and a few colleagues have noticed. She walks down the aisle like she owns it because she does. Her name is on the drafting files, in the concrete, in the contracts that kept this place honest. When she reaches Ethan, she grins, wide and unguarded. You are not crying. She whispers. Give me a second. He whispers back. I am behind schedule. The officiant clears his throat, smiling. Welcome. He says. We are gathered in a building that did not exist 2 years ago, designed by the woman standing here today, funded in part by the company this man will one day lead. It feels appropriate that their vows should be spoken under a roof they built together. The ceremony is short and unsentimental, just as they requested. No mention of fairy tales. Plenty of talk about partnership, respect, mutual stubbornness. When it is time for vows, Ethan goes first. Win. He says, voice steady but thick. The first time I saw you, you were yelling at a contractor twice your size, because he tried to swap out high-grade steel for something cheaper. You were furious. You were right. I fell a little bit in love right then. A ripple of laughter runs through the crowd. The contractor in question, seated in the 3rd row, hides his face. You told me. Ethan continues. That buildings remember how they are treated. That every corner cut, every lazy decision, lives in the walls forever. I think people are the same. The way we show up for each other becomes part of who we are. He takes a breath. So here is my promise. He says. I will not cut corners with you. Not with the truth, not with time, not with my respect. I will argue with you when I think you are wrong, and listen when I realize I am. I will never ask you to make yourself smaller so I can feel bigger. And when the world calls you difficult for insisting on your standards, I will stand next to you and tell them that difficult is another word for necessary. He smiles. Also, he adds, I will never again put a coffee cup on your blueprints. Laughter breaks the emotion, exactly as he intended. Winnie's eyes are bright when she begins. Ethan, she says. The first time you showed up late to a site meeting, you tried to blame the subway. Then you admitted you had stopped to take pictures of the morning light on a brick wall. I thought, this man is either a poetic idiot or someone who sees the world the way I do. He grins. You turned out to be both. She says. More laughter. You walked into my studio and treated me like an equal before I had anything impressive to show on paper. She says. You listened to my crazy ideas about public space and said, that is bigger than this budget, but let us find a way. You saw me at my most exhausted, my most stubborn, my most terrified. You loved me through all of it. Her voice softens. So here is my promise. She says. I will not let you disappear into your titles. I will remind you that you are more than a last name on a building. When your family pulls you toward the path they carved, I will pull you toward the one you chose. I will fight with you, not against you, when the two clash. And when you forget how brave you were the day you signed away part of your inheritance for the sake of something better, I will remind you. She pauses, then smiles. And I will never make fun of your terrible scrambled eggs again. In public. Catherine laughs the loudest at that. The rings are small, simple bands of metal, cool and steady between their fingers. When the officiant pronounces them married, the applause feels less like a polite reflex and more like a genuine wave. Afterward, the reception spills out into the plaza. Food trucks line one side, fancy canapes on one end, tacos and dumplings on the other. Kids chase each other around the sculpture in the center. A local band plays under the shade of the terraces. Winnie stands with a glass of champagne, watching the building move. The way people lean against the railings, sit on the steps, take pictures against the textured walls. It feels less like a monument and more like a living thing. Pretty good turnout. Ethan says, slipping an arm around her waist. For a wedding or for a building opening? She asks. Both. He says. She leans into him, head resting against his shoulder. Do you remember the day your mother walked into my studio with that check? She says. I hated her so much I could taste it. I remember. He says. I also remember you ripping it up like it was a grocery list. She is over there right now, telling someone that I terrorize contractors more efficiently than you ever did. Winnie says. I am fairly sure that is her version of saying she loves me. They both glance over. Catherine stands in a small circle, gesturing animatedly, a faint smile tugging at her lips as she imitates someone's panicked expression. The people around her laugh. Progress, Ethan says. Across the plaza, a banner hangs above the entrance. Walker Grant Institute for Urban Design. Winnie still cringes a little at her name up there, but the sight also fills her with a fierce pride. They launched the institute 6 months ago. Applications came in from all over the world. The first cohort of fellows starts in the fall. Scholarships cover students who grew up in neighborhoods like the one she came from, kids who thought architecture was only for people with trust funds. We did that, she says softly. We did, he says. A city official strides up, hand extended. Congratulations to you both, she says. The council is already talking about partnering on another project across the river. Word is, they only want you two on it. We will send a proposal, Winnie says. When the official moves on, Ethan grins. Look at you, he says. Negotiating on your wedding day. Look at us, she corrects. The contract couple, doing what we do best. He pulls her onto the makeshift dance floor as the band shifts into a slow song. They sway under the open sky, city sounds blending with the music. Do you ever miss the days when nobody knew who you were? She asks. Sometimes, he says. I miss anonymity at the grocery store. I miss sitting in your studio for hours without any cameras pointed in our direction. Same, she says. But then I remember that back then, the only people who listened to me were interns and exhausted project managers. Now I get to walk into rooms where decisions are made and say, no, that is not good enough, and people actually stop and think. He smiles against her hair. I liked you when you were yelling at contractors, he says. I love you even more yelling at my relatives and city councils. Funny, she says. I love you most when you are standing behind me in those rooms, not saying a word, but making sure everyone knows I am not alone. He tightens his arm around her waist. You will never be alone again, he says. Later, as the sun dips and the lights in the building glow warmer, Winnie steps away from the noise for a moment. She wanders to the edge of the plaza, looking up at the facade. The glass reflects a woman in a white dress and boots under the hem, hair curling from the humidity, eyes bright. A year ago, she was just a woman in a small studio, fighting for every project. Now she is still that woman, but also more a partner, a leader, a walker by marriage, and a Grant by stubborn choice. Her phone buzzes. A new email notification pops up from the institute's shared inbox. Subject: scholarship application question. She smiles. Work will never wait. Neither will life. Behind her, Ethan calls her name. His voice carries easily over the music. Win. He shouts. Come back. Your mother-in-law is threatening to tell embarrassing stories about me to the interns. She only knows the ones I've edited. Winnie calls back. She tucks her phone into her pocket and walks toward him, toward the family that once tried to pay her off, and now trusts her with their legacy, toward the building that will outlast them all, towards the life they drafted in contracts, argued over in boardrooms, and now live in, day after day. No one will ever know how close this story came to being written, in a different direction. How easily $10 million could have bought silence, how quietly a studio could have closed, how quickly love could have folded under pressure. But as Winnie takes Ethan's hand and pulls him back onto the dance floor, as laughter rises around them, and the city breathes in and out, she knows one thing for sure. They chose the harder blueprint. The one with more risk and more load and less margin for error. The one worth building, brick by stubborn, shining brick.
Thanks for watching. Follow for more romance stories.